Welcome back to Close Up. There's always something to discuss at the New Hampshire State House, but this is the season when things get really interesting, especially in a budget year. Here to talk about all of it is Senate President Donna Soucy, former Senate Majority Leader Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro, Deputy Minority Leader of the House, Sherm Packard, and House Speaker Steve Shurtleff. So much appreciation here to have all of you guys here packed in on our little set here. Appreciate it. And let's start off talking about an issue that has kind of commanded the headlines in the last week or so, which is the secure psychiatric unit that there seemed to be so much agreement on in the inaugural address and the first budget address. Mr. Speaker, the House has decided to take money for that specific item out of the budget and do other things. Explain that decision. Sure,
I'd be glad to. $26 million was budgeted to build a new forensic hospital at the New Hampshire Hospital grounds. We heard about this, the hospital in the Governor's State of the Union, State of the State rather, but we never heard anything after that, and there was a lot of questions. All of us here either currently or at one time served in the New Hampshire House, and we know the capital expenditures normally are in House Bill 25 that goes to the Public Works Committee that deals with construction. This was put in HB 2 and went to the Finance Committee. There were a lot of unanswered questions, and the Finance Committee thought the best thing to do was look into the possibility of, when the children's unit at the New Hampshire Hospital is moved to Nashua, to rehab those 24 beds into 48 beds and make that the secure psychiatric unit there. We're bringing like 24 people down from the unit that is now located at the Department of Corrections. That would save a tremendous amount of money. Now, this may change as we go forward and learn more, but we think that's the best interest of the patients at the hospital and also in the best interest of New Hampshire taxpayers.
Senator Bradley, the Democrats are offering you a solution for less money here. Why not take it?
Well, I think we have to build a new facility. It's not just people at the state prison that are being housed with dangerous criminals that have not committed any crime. It's people in county jails. And so we need to move the kids from the New Hampshire Hospital, the adolescents, to Nashua, as Speaker Shurtleff said. But we also have to have a new facility so that we have more bed space at the New Hampshire Hospital to solve the emergency boarding process. Now, the Senate voted for my legislation, which is the governor's proposal, 24-0. So I suspect that before all said and done, in June, we're going to have another discussion about it, because I believe that the Senate supports where the governor went on this. The governor's 10-year mental health plan builds on several different things that are very important. We need more community beds, more mobile crisis units, more hospital beds, and we need to make this facility at the New Hampshire Hospital work. I've worked with Tom Sherman, who is a senator from Hampton, on Senate Bill 11, his bill, to have the governor's 10-year plan plus my bill be put into law. And I think that's the way we have to go. We have to have some of everything, including also Senator Rosenwald's bill, which will enhance Medicaid rates. It has to be comprehensive. We can't do it in a piecemeal fashion, and that's why I think the governor's plan is the way to go.
Senate President Soucy, what is the majority's perspective here? Do you think there is going to be a new facility constructed?
I think there needs to be a new facility constructed. I think once the Senate has an opportunity to look at the House's budget, we'll make some different priorities, determinations. But I do believe that we have to have a comprehensive approach to dealing with mental health, and it involves many things. It involves moving children out of the current situation they're in New Hampshire Hospital to Nashua. It involves increasing rates, and it involves getting back to what New Hampshire was historically known for, was enhancement of community-based services so that people can live in the community, and when they're in crisis, that there are more immediate services available to them, and that they're in a more appropriate setting, not a correctional facility.
And Representative Packard, when this appropriation was in the budget, there wasn't anything in there for staffing or putting the people in there. This could be a big expense over time. What's the House Republican perspective here?
Well, the House Republican perspective is that, you know, this is something that's been a long time coming. It's something that we need to start moving forward with and stop kicking the can down the road, which we have been. And we have people scattered all over the state, in a manner of speaking, that need this facility. You know, we're talking between 40 and 60 beds, and it's something that's going to help the mental health issue in the state. So we really feel that we should be moving forward with this, and you know, stop putting things off as you know, sometimes been done in the past.
Another big discussion going on right now at the State House and heading towards the governor's desk is paid family and medical leave. We'll start with you, Senator Bradley. Senate Republicans have been trying to draw the line, saying that a lot of the policies being put forward now are harmful to business. When this paid family leave bill comes back to the legislature, where are we going to see this debate go?
Well, I suspect it's going to be put into the budget. I mean, obviously the House has tried to put it into the budget. The problem we have are severalfold. First of all, it's mandatory. Second of all, it's a tax on employees' wages as an income tax. And third, there is unprecedented authority for the Commissioner of Employment Security to raise the tax because of the financial uncertainty. So I hope that and I expect the governor will veto this bill if it is a standalone bill, that people that support paid family leave, and I'm one of those, but works with the governor on a voluntary plan that's not mandatory and is not an income tax. And I think that's critically important. The governor has worked very hard to try and solve this problem, and we need to have the same approach that we had on Medicaid expansion over the last several years, where people work together, where they listen, where they communicate, and where they come up with a compromise. And so far that hasn't happened. It's unfortunate.
Is there a compromise here, Senator Soucy?
Well, it's Senate Bill 1, so it's a #1 priority of the New Hampshire Senate. It's something that we have worked on with people around the state for a number of years, and we recognize that the only way that this is going to work is if it's an all-in program. It's a program that will afford people the opportunity to care for their loved ones when they have a crisis in their family, and that's something that I don't think you can easily dismiss. I know that there were attempts to try to dismiss some of the folks that were advocating for this issue, but the fact of the matter is that if your loved one is suffering from cancer, needs treatment, you need to be there. You need to be available to them. And this system would create a system for all Granite Staters, for everyone to benefit from. It's also a system that would allow for businesses that so choose to find a private insurer and to pay the premiums. They could pay the premiums on behalf of their employees. This system is something we have looked at over a number of years, and we believe it's important to Granite Staters. We also believe it's something very important to retain our young people here in the state and to attract new people to New Hampshire to live and work and thrive.
Representative Packard, part of this debate has been the governor's proposed twin state leave program. That was taken out of the budget in the House. What is the Republican solution if that's not in the budget?
Well, we're hoping that this will be fixed in the Senate, but I'm not sure it will be. But let's look at the facts. I mean, this is a income tax on workers. It's estimated that it's going to cost $15 million to set up. It's estimated it's going to cost 40 new employees, and the administration costs each year are going to be approximately $6.6 million. This is unsustainable. And that's why we firmly believe that the governor has a much better plan, and we're hoping that that will be implemented in the end.
Mr. Speaker, how is a premium on wages not an income tax?
Well, I think it reminds me of reading about the 1936 presidential election when Republicans campaigned on the platform that Social Security was a Ponzi scheme and wouldn't work. And I think that's the same we're hearing now on family leave. The House has a plan that we put in the budget, and this is a plan that was vetted in the legislature last session when the Democrats were in the minority, but yet it was passed in a bipartisan manner in the House and in the Senate. I think the plan is good and it's viable and it will work for both employers and employees. The governor has told us about his twin state plan and the meeting that he had with Governor Scott in Littleton, but talking to legislators in the Vermont House, it's not going to pass in Vermont. They have no appetite for it. So I don't understand why the governor is still pursuing that when he knows that it's not going to pass.
2 weeks in a row now, we've had large-scale police situations involving suspects who've been free under the principles of the bail reform law that was passed last year. There was the Quality Inn standoff in Manchester, and then to end the week up in Alexandria, there was someone who'd committed a home invasion, and Mr. Gedney. Goffstown police in March had released information about a slew of arrests that he had undergone in a number of different communities, from Brentwood to Pembroke to Bow, a long list, and every time he's getting out on $0 bail. Representative Packard, when this was approved on a voice vote in the House, did Republicans know that they were getting this?
Whenever you pass a bill like this, sometimes you have to come back and fix it. I mean, I don't believe any of us on either side of the aisle expected this to happen. And unfortunately, it did happen, and now we have to fix it.
Senate President Soucy, there's a compromise that you were involved in hammering out. Are you confident that it will be able to resolve situations like this, which are clearly very dangerous for the police and the community?
Absolutely. I worked with Senator Bradley and with others around the table. The ACLU was represented, the chiefs of police, to make sure that we have a system that ensures the safety of the public and ensures the safety of the individual. And I think there were some questions previously that gave judges discretion or that were subject to interpretation that we didn't agree with. I think we've hammered that out now, and I'm confident that the solution will do two things. One, ensure that people who are very dangerous and who are a threat will be on significant amount of bail so that they can't be released. But on the other hand, we're not incarcerating people solely for their inability. Safe people, people that have committed low-level crimes, we're not incarcerating them just because they don't have any money.
I do want to pivot to one last question here. The issue of civility has come up in both bodies so much. Speaker Shurtleff, I know in the Criminal Justice Committee they had a big discussion last week on this about how to move forward, especially with social media as the overlay, where representatives saying, well, you say one thing to my face and they say something else on social media. How big of a problem is this?
Well, I think we've seen changes since the 15 years that I've been in the legislature. There's less civility than there used to be. And I think as the Speaker of the House, that's one of my primary jobs, is to ensure that we maintain the decorum of the House. And it's something we're working on constantly, and it's something that both Democrats and Republicans agree, that we've got to work more together and less name-calling and personalizing legislation in private messages.
And quickly, Senator Bradley, you've seen this in Washington and here in Concord. Is that Washington creeping into Concord, do you think?
You know, I think far less so in the New Hampshire Senate, and I think the example that Senator Soucy just talked about with the bail reform package, you know, we both had to sit down and understand that what our best intended efforts last year were problematic, and we listened to each other and we came to a conclusion. Now, we've also heard some partisan disagreements here. Paid family medical leave, I think an anti-business bias that's happening. But we all, I think 24 of us, respect each other. We listen to each other. That doesn't mean we agree, and we have some pretty spirited debates. But at the end of the day, I don't see any name calling in the New Hampshire Senate. We might be upset with each other because we disagree, but I think that we do so very, very agreeably, and I think it's a credit to Senator Morse's leadership in the past, Senator Larson, who was the past Senate President, and now Senator Soucy. I think we respect each other, and that's very important.
Okay, Senators, Representatives, we thank you for your time. We very appreciate this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.